going and the live stream is active.
Great. Thank you, James. Appreciate you and the rest of the team. I'd like to welcome you out this morning to this UETN board meeting. Thank you for members of the board who are here. We'd like to welcome any and all members of the UETN staff and team, as well as any guests and visitors who might be joining, as well as those who might just be watching and observing live. My name is Robert Wagner, and I am the chair of the UETN board. We have several things for our agenda this afternoon, but as we typically do, we want to first start and I will accept a motion to approve the minutes from our previous board meeting, which was held on February 10th. So I hope board members have had an opportunity to review those notes, those who were in attendance, and I will entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, David. All in favor, please raise your hand. And any opposed? Thank you. The motion passes and those minutes are approved. We will now go on to our action item. And this first one for me personally is bittersweet. It's a good news, bad news situation for the UETN board. Good news certainly for him in that he has earned the right and the opportunity to move on, but bad news for us because he is going to be sorely missed. I would like to turn the time over to Executive Director Spencer Jenkins, who is going to take a moment to honor and to recognize Rich Finlinson.
Thank you, Chair Wagner. And yes, you put it well. It's sort of bittersweet, but at the same time, I have to congratulate Rich. I think this is what we strive for: is going out on our terms and hopefully with a happy outlook for what's ahead. Rich has announced his retirement after 25 years. Can you, let's see, I was going to try and share my screen, Tim. Hopefully this can come up, sorry. But we do have a resolution, sort of like winning the big check. There we go. But after 25 years, Rich has announced his retirement. He will be formally retiring in June. However, he's got enough. He's going to leave us here at the end of May. We'll greatly miss him. As you know, 25 years here at UETN, that is a long time, and there's been a lot of events that have transpired over those 25 years. For me personally, I've known Rich because when I started in my previous capacity over at the Utah System of Higher Education, it was in the communications area, and interacted regularly with Rich at that time, and have kind of interacted intermittently ever since. And he's always been a very steady hand, wise, and very helpful in offering great ideas and support in a very steady way, even when some of the, there's a burning crisis at our door. So Rich, we're going to miss you. Chair Wagner, did you want someone, or I'd be happy to read, or if you want someone else to read the resolution.
Do you know what, Spencer? Why don't we have you read that? And I would like this to be a board action item. So Spencer, if you can read it, and then I will take it from there.
Okay, happy to do it. And I apologize. I'll get my reading voice going here. Whereas Rich Finlinson, Director of Public Relations and Communications, is retiring, having delivered faithful service to the Utah Education and Telehealth Network for 25 years. And whereas Finlinson has had a long and varied career, acquiring myriad skills such as customer service from his position as a ride operator and gate attendant at Lagoon Amusement Park, communication skills through his work as a radio reporter, producer, and news director, and business skills gained through serving as a marketing coordinator and systems consultant, all of which he brought to UETN in 1997. And whereas Finlayson, a lifelong learner, completed his master's degree in instructional design and educational technology in 2010, and certificate as an accredited public relations professional in 2014, bringing additional skills to benefit UETN and its stakeholders. And whereas Finlayson has demonstrated aptitude and creativity in storytelling, content creation, and marketing as reflected in his work, including his book, How to Capture Ideas and Create Compelling Content, an A to Z Approach, which I have a signed copy of. And whereas throughout his career, Finlayson has worked tirelessly to promote education and broadband access for all while staying in tune with the latest technologies. And whereas Finlayson has applied these skills to support the SciNet conference since 2016, where he perfected the art of social media campaigns, and during SC19, conducted more than 60 interviews and developed a recognition program that ensured every member of the SciNet team was thanked for their contributions. And where during SC21, he created and skillfully managed SCTV. And whereas Finlayson has brought to work and life an ability to cultivate relationships and to truly listen when others speak, making others feel comfortable and valued. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the UETN Board of Directors expresses gratitude for his decades of service, for his sound advice on communication campaigns, for his valued relationships, and for all that he has contributed to help the Utah Education Telehealth Network provide essential services to our great state. Further, be it resolved that the UETN Board wishes Rich Finlayson continued health, happiness, prosperity, and joyful times with his grandchildren. We thank him for his service, his collegiality, and his many contributions to UETN success. The UETN Board, April 14th, 2023.
Thank you, Spencer. I appreciate you reading that very, very appropriate board resolution. Before the board votes, I'd like to give Rich an opportunity to just say a few words. And Rich, I hope once again that you know of our gratitude, our sincere and deep appreciation for all that you have done and all that you have meant to this organization. Thank you very much. If I could ask a personal indulgence during your comments here, if you could please let us know what rides you operated at Lagoon. That would certainly satisfy part of my curiosity. So, Rich, please.
Well, thank you very much. It has been a great ride here at UETN for the last 25 years. And my ride operating experience did start at Lagoon, where Steve Hess was the manager of refreshments, as I recall, food services manager. So I worked with Steve many, many decades now. But I started as a operator of the.
Let me turn my video off.
There we go. I started as a operator of the Animal Land train that went around Lagoon Lake, and I gave breaks on the boat that went around Lagoon Lake. So I worked in the in Kitty Land, and then eventually rose to becoming a gate attendant, taking the parking fees that came in. And Steve had a special shack where employees could go get refreshments as they took their breaks. So Steve, you've fed us in many ways over many decades. I'd just like to express my appreciation for the many relationships that I've been able to develop. It's really made my work environment so productive and so pleasurable. And I'm grateful for all the people that I've had a chance to work with and the people that we've been able to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Once again, please accept our heartfelt gratitude. Congratulations and best wishes to you as you move on to a new chapter. That's very, very exciting. I will entertain a motion from the board to approve the resolution as it was read by Spencer.
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, David. All in favor of approving the resolution to honor Rich Finlandson and his great contributions during his career and time. Board members, please raise your hand if you approve. And any opposed? Wonderful. The motion and resolution passes. And once again, Rich, please, thank you so very, very much for your fantastic work. In a meeting last week, I was joking with Spencer. I was wondering who was going to write the resolution, because Rich, you have worked with me a number of times over the years in writing such resolutions. So your talents have been so much appreciated.
Dr.
Okay.
Wagner, if I could just note real quickly, we plan to do a reception in May for Rich, and we'll get that information to the board as soon as that's scheduled.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Spencer. Okay, we will move on to our next action item. This is a follow-up to last meeting. Our Vice Chair Patty Norman was not able to join our meeting this morning, but she has been taking the lead in looking at board engagement with the board engagement committee that's looking at how our board is engaging with our different constituency groups as well as with our advisory councils, and looking for ways to improve communication and information flow. I believe with Patty's absence that Spencer is going to talk about next steps in this process.
Thank you, Chair Wagner. Actually, I'm going to punt right over to Laura Hunter, who's going to run with this on our behalf.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great surprise. Thanks. So at the last board meeting, I think you heard an update from Patty that the committee is recommending working with a consultant who has expertise in this area and can bring an outside fresh perspective to the work, and primarily focusing on how to better engage the board and council members and the communication flow and support between those two groups. So a consultant has been identified. The board discussed it at the last meeting, and you asked us to go back and get a little more detail about the timeline and the budget. And the person hasn't been approved by purchasing yet. That's a little premature, but Spencer can provide more details that it certainly does fit within our budget. And the timeline that we're expecting is that he would have some board involvement with the board during their retreat in September. So working primarily as soon as we can engage him with the board's approval, and then through the spring and summer with a report back in the early fall. And so this is an action item that would need approval from the board in order to move forward with purchasing to engage the consultant as the committee has recommended.
Okay, and so there is a consultant that's been identified. UETN will work with the University of Utah purchasing to then follow all of the necessary steps and protocols to then secure the consultant to begin this work. So the action item by the board would be to approve moving forward with those steps. Spencer, do you have anything more to add?
Yeah, and I'm sorry about the handoff here back and forth. Just a couple of details. This consultant came at the recommendation of Rick Gaisford. He's also worked with other R&E networks like UETN in Michigan and South Carolina. He's very attuned to UETN and what we're focusing on. And the scope of this really is about the board engagement in relation to the councils and committees. And so hopefully here the timeline is roughly over the summer, he'll get to work and likely engage with all of you individually or even as a group during that time frame. But the idea is hopefully some deliverables that then you as a board can use at that retreat this fall.
Yeah, I think that is the timeline that we discussed with our retreat in September. I think the timing would be good to be able to bring that information back to us as a board and have more time to go in depth on the recommendation So I will entertain a motion then to move forward in these steps with the consultant. Is
make that
there a
motion.
motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Greg. Any discussion? Okay, hearing no discussion. Those in favor, please raise your hand. And any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward. This is something that also came out from our last retreat, and looking forward as a board to receiving more information and recommendation on how we can engage more and have more effective communication flow as a board. So this will be great. I appreciate the work of Laura and Patty. Rick, thank you very much for the recommendation. And I do want to mention Patty too and the work that she is doing with this. We'll now go on to our next action item, which is policy revisions. And I will turn the time, I believe, to Laura.
Correct. Thank you. So a few months ago, we, speaking of consultants, we engaged a consultant to do a mock review of our compliance with all of the requirements as a public broadcaster with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting guidelines. They are very strict on open meeting law, for example, and it's nice that we also have that in Utah. So we did very well with that mock review, but there were a couple recommended changes to policies that you have in the attachment in this item. So I'm just going to quickly walk through those. The first set is in our diversity policy, and there's 3 changes that are recommended. Mostly adding advisory groups so that we're including diversity expectations with our advisory councils in addition to the board. And then the third one, we track diversity metrics and we're required to report on diversity metrics annually, and we usually work with HR. And to be honest, we take a best guess at the diversity metrics for the council members and board members. And so the best practice recommendation from the consultant is to do an annual, very brief survey of the board members and council members to get those demographics more locked in. This is really similar to an FCC requirement, if you can believe it or not, that we need to check with the Board of Higher Education annually and see if any of them own media properties or have a felony on their record in the last year. And so it's a very simple process that we do through DocuSign, but that's the recommended change just to make sure we have more accurate demographics. And then the next set of recommendations are to the public comment policy. The board approved this policy recently, and just making sure we extend that public comment option in our open meetings that are held by councils. And then also having councils be referred to just more generally. In the policy as it stands now, we name the specific councils, and over time, those names may change or the types of councils may change beyond what's specified in state law. And so this would just make it a little more evergreen, so the board can establish other councils if they want to. So these are the recommended changes from the consultant that I'd be looking for action from the board.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Any questions from members of the board about these proposed changes?
I have a couple
Yes,
questions.
please.
So I understand the desire to have diverse representation and reflect Utah on this. What's the compliance side of this if we adopt this as policy this way? Is there a check on that for us as an organization? I know we're gathering some data and metrics there in the suggested changes, but I know in some of these groups it's very challenging to get a very diverse representation.
Should I go ahead, Chair? Yeah, okay. Thanks for the question.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for the question, David. And the link to the policy specifies how exactly we report this. So we are required to report by the FCC and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting on several diversity measures. First, we're required annually to do training by the board and council members and all of our staff members. And each year, the general manager, who is Spencer, certifies that we have completed that full training for everyone. And then we have set as a board the diversity goal to continue to improve representation on all of our governance. And so we track those metrics and then report annually how close or far we are from the Utah population as a whole, since we serve the whole state. So you'll see on that policy, there's a small table where we list the diversity for the staff members and governance as it compares to the state, and if we've improved in matching the demographics of the state or if we're further away from it. And that's all required annually, and then we certify that when Spencer signs off to be able to apply for the public broadcasting funding. Hope that answers your question.
It mostly does. What happens if we don't meet our goals? Do we have an improvement plan? Is somebody going to come and ask us to fix it? How does that go?
Yeah, so in our strategic plan, the board has already approved a goal to make sure that our representation aligns with the representation of the state. And so moving toward that, and there's a lot of ways I'm sure you're familiar with to try and make sure we have a diverse pool of applicants. For example, whenever there's a vacancy on the board and we reach out to the appointing agency, we remind them that that's one of the goals of the board, and if they have a more diverse candidate or candidates that are qualified to be on the board, to please keep that in mind when they make their appointments and so on. So it's already in policy that the board has approved, and this is just demonstrating progress toward matching that policy.
Okay, any other questions?
That's helpful, Laura. Thank you for sharing that.
Other questions? If there are none, which it sounds like there aren't, I would entertain a motion to approve these policy revisions. Is there a motion?
I'll move that motion.
Thank you, Brittany. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much, Taryn. The motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. And any opposed? Thank you. The motion passes. The policy revisions are approved. I believe that takes care of our action items for this morning. So board members, thank you very much for your participation and attention on those. We're going to move now to our discussion items. And our first discussion item is Laura will be introducing Jim Marshall, who will be talking about results from the library needs assessment. I will mention that board member Chandra Johnson, who does represent the Utah State Library, was unable to join us this morning, but I will turn the time to Laura and Jim.
Thank you. And Chandra and her team at the libraries have been really helpful with this work, as I'm sure you'll hear. So Dr. Marshall, you may have seen him before. He's done previous research for us with the American Graduate Project and our Climate Science Project and Utah Futures. He is a professor at San Diego State University, and his scholarly work centers around educational technology and implementing educational technology change in organizations and the effectiveness of those changes. So he'll tell you a little bit more about that and report on the work that has been happening over the past few months to assess the needs of the library community so that we could have a more informed decision going into RFP and contract renewals for this coming year. And the other thing I'll mention is that we should have some congratulations. There's a forthcoming book, I understand, that will be published at the beginning of next month that he's been working hard on and was able to fit this work in the middle of all of that. So I introduce you to Jim Marshall.
Good morning, Chair Wagner and board members. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour through the data, knowing that the full report will follow in a couple of weeks. So this is just going to be very much the high points. My first request, I'm all set to go here. I'm going to share my screen, and you may want to make it big. As we step through this, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I spent my entire life time that was in grad school working for the San Diego Zoo as a train operator. So I feel very at home today with Rich here and on his retirement. And I also have a master's degree in instructional systems and design. So birds of a feather flock together, I guess. But congratulations on your retirement. As I said, I'm going to step through this quickly. I have about 4 times more slides than I have time with you today. And so hopefully I will whet your appetite. And when the report comes out, you will look forward to consuming it in more detail. But this is a needs assessment. I would typify it as needs assessment as opposed to research. We consulted 2 groups of folks through a carefully designed survey. The first group was library professionals. And as you can see, we have representation from pretty much every type of library across the state of Utah. These responses came from 26 out of the 29 counties of Utah. And so I'll be sharing their perspective on resources and databases and the needs for the future. We also heard from some folks in the general public, and we did necessarily limit this to people 18 ages and over. The vast majority of those folks, more than half, were 35 to 54 years old, but we asked them about multiple dimensions of their use of library resources and databases, and I will share with you their perspectives as well, and briefly talk about the similarities and differences between what our library professionals are projecting and then the general public use. Before I jump into that, here are the 11 types of resources that we framed our queries around. So as the system in the state looks to make decisions in terms of investments for databases and resources to serve for the next, I believe, 10 years, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, I see your head nodding. These were working with the task force that is charged with these recommendations. These are the 11 types of database/resources that we queried against. So we wanted to get an idea what's being used from the perspective of library professionals and the general public, and what are those needs as we look to the future. So each of the ratings that you'll see and the usage projections will be based on these 11 categories of database and resource use. So let's start here with the current database use, and this is rated on a scale, a low of 1 at little or no use, up to highest use on the left-hand side. And again, I realize there is a lot of data on this screen in terms of words, but the databases across the bottom and all of the data I'll present today is going to follow this pattern. But you can quickly see the digital library, not a surprise to any of the folks I was working with on this study. is the most highly used sort of resource. And then as you go across histories, biographies, cultures, and current event databases, falls in second there, just at moderate use. So this is the library professionals' current use estimates. If you think back to the first slide I showed you, I showed a range of library types that included city, county, university, and K-12. We did not have an equal sample. So using correction measures, I actually made the sample equal. So each type of library was equally represented. And what I will just tell you is when I weight it to give them each equal voice, the patterns don't change very much. And you can see this here because the blue line would be what I showed you unweighted. And now with the green imposed on that, you can see that the numbers generally mirror each other, occasionally a tick higher, occasionally a tick lower. So to a degree, we can say that across the library types, that the current use estimates don't differ greatly. Not surprisingly, when you think about the types of libraries that are in there, homework help goes down. And you'll see that in a minute to be far more applicable to our K-12 folks and some other minor things that with logic do make sense. Let's talk now about the current database and resource needs. So here we have the general public, and we asked general public folks when they responded to indicate their need for each type of database in 3 areas to the extent all 3 applied. Their personal need represented by the yellow lines. And again, you will see the general public follows the library professional trends with that digital library really standing out. So those are their personal needs. The needs for their families. So if they indicated they had children, they were asked, okay, the resources their families need. So that would be the purple line. And then lastly, their professional needs, which would be the orange line. So again, one of the things that we will note here is, especially with regard to the personal need, the needs expressed by these general public who were recruited through the library system. So they are folks already using these databases. Their projections don't differ that much from the library professionals. So happily, there is quite a bit of consensus here. And this is where I'd like to show that very fact. So going back, the library professional use estimate for the future is in blue, and then I've superimposed the general public personal need estimates in yellow against that. So they are a bit lower overall compared to the library professionals, but they do, with 2 exceptions, well, 2, maybe you'd say 3 with science and technology on the end, but early learning and homework help, those are the 2 areas where we often in this data consistently see a little bit of difference. And I do believe when you think about logically why that might be, early learning and homework help, that's going to skew homework help, especially if you have kids and you're helping them with that homework. All right, so now comparing the current needs and the future needs. Here's what the library professionals, again, weighted. So all of our types of libraries have equal say in this slide. You can see the current need, which I've been sharing with you from the first slide, and then above it, in all cases, the future need. So the headline really from the library professional standpoint is that future needs mirror current needs, but they're just consistently a little higher up. What I'd like to do now, and again, I know this is a lot of data on the screen. I'm gonna walk through really quickly, and you can eyeball the graph. But each library type, because it is very interesting, I've already kind of hinted at the fact that the university and K-12 libraries do differ, but this is all of them, current versus future need estimates. You can see the state library similarly follows that overall pattern. So too with the city library. And again, we see the digital library standing out. County library, again, not a whole lot of difference. And then here's where things change a bit. We get to the university library, and it's far more pronounced in terms of the highs and the lows. Obviously, homework help is not exactly the university library's primary need. But again, logically, science and technology goes up here. The digital library remains high. Health resources and databases stand out. Again, with my colleagues that commissioned this study, and we've talked about this, we believe what we see in this difference does lead us towards an increased belief in the accuracy of the data. And again, K-12 libraries, you'll see, interestingly, here's where the homework help gets drawn up. And you can see genealogy and family history resources lower in the K-12 libraries, as is the business databases. You can see to the very left. So there is some interesting topography here, depending on what type of library you are. All things that the committee, and I'll present this work to them in about 2 weeks, but all things that they're wrestling with, and this will be another data point that upon which they can rely. I have 2 more questions to share with you, and then I'll wrap up. 2 other areas here, one being, what is the library professional's viewpoint on the abilities of the people who are using the library, and what type of support do they need? And so this is the library professionals telling us what types of support their patrons need. And the different colors represent the different kinds of libraries, because as you might imagine, again, the university and K-12 libraries may differ a little bit. But again, largely what they're telling us is that patrons, especially in the county library and the city library, and to extent K-12, must rely on the library staff to help them access the content they seek. Sadly, it would appear they're not regularly mentioning the need for additional database and resource content. But again, I would say that could corroborate what we saw earlier, which is the current use and the needs for future are not that far apart. Again, the university libraries tend to trend higher on each of these dimensions. And one might argue that is why at a university you have research librarians and folks who specialize in that deeper sort of use of the database and helping patrons, or in the case of university library students and faculty, get the information they need. My last area of our last area of inquiry that I'll share with you today, again, condensing for time, support preferences, how to get that support. So we asked library professionals, for yourselves and for the people using your library, how do you see the effectiveness of these 4 types of supports: webinars, in-person training, video tutorials, and quick reference guides via portable document format files? And so for the library professionals themselves, they tend to believe in-person training and video tutorials are the most effective relative to webinars and PDF quick reference guides. For the general public, again, they tell us that they believe for the general public, webinars would be the least effective. It's rated just below somewhat effective. And then the video tutorials would be their highest, rated at 2.57. And last but not least, we asked the general public respondents which of those same supports would they use. And it is interesting to look at it as broken down by age. The red line would be our respondents who were 66 years of age or better. And you can see their preference goes to video tutorials, seconded by webinars. And then our folks who rated them all the lowest in terms of their likelihood of using would have been the 25 to 34-year-olds, with the 18 to 24-year-olds right behind them. There is some clustering in the quick reference guides you can see up there. Less are 55 to 65-year-old folks. Those lines do tend to come together towards the end, right around probably would use. So perhaps the item here with the most consensus. So that is, as I said, a whirlwind tour through just a few of the data high points. As I said, one of the main headlines that we've discussed, and we'll have the chance to discuss face-to-face at a meeting in 2 weeks, really is that overall, the data that from these surveys is suggesting the resources that are currently being provided are being used, and the future need is, basically keep doing what you're doing. A few peaks and valleys that will be fodder for discussion as the committee considers the full range of inputs that they have in terms of informing their work and leading them to a decision. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass things back to Laura if she has anything to add.
Just a big thank you, and the board will receive the link to the full report, as Jim said, by the end of the month. So I think it's back to you, actually, Robert.
Thank you, Laura, and Dr. Marshall, thank you very much for that presentation and information. It's interesting. I'm glad the library is doing this. Want to open it up to board members to see if anyone has any questions about this report. Okay, well, it was a very complete report too, and once again, appreciate those efforts. So Dr. Marshall, thank you again for joining us this morning.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for involving me. It's been, needs assessment is my favorite thing to do. So it's a pleasure. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Great,
thanks. We'll go on to our next discussion item. This is the FY24 budget summary discussion. As board members, I'm sure you know this is one of our most important responsibilities, is to review and discuss, and then eventually at our next meeting we'll be approving the FY24 budget. So this is an opportunity for Lisa to just present the budget in its current state for us to discuss and ask any questions. So I will turn the time over to Lisa.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, we have 2 pages attached. They're summary documents. The first one is the income, and the second one will be the expense. And I'm going to talk about the income right now, though. And I just kind of want to go over the format so everyone understands. So to your left, you see the word income sources. That defines what is the source of income. The fiscal year 2023 was the approved budget that was approved by the board a year ago. The fiscal year 23 projected budget reflects where we actually think it's coming in at. So we review the expenses. We look at this, make sure it's, is it over or under? We actually reflect that the same as the income. And then your fiscal year 24, we have it as the ongoing operational base budget. Then I have another column for the one-time dollars. And then your last column on the right is your total fiscal year 24 budget. So the first, I'm going to kind of just talk in general so everyone has a general understanding of what funds UETN. And the first line item is state appropriations. And our total state appropriations is comprised, is first of all, is total is 35.377 million, and it's comprised of two components. If you look at there's the first line item under UEN legislative funding. Then if you drop down a couple lines and you see telehealth, there's the other portion of the state appropriations. And if we remember from throughout the legislative session, UETN received 4 additional fundings to our base budget, and that was the compensation and benefits at $923K. We received telehealth services for $180K, interactive video conferencing, and that was the software for the scheduling system for $570K. And then we also received $400K for 2 new FTEs, and it was for specialized network engineering. So that gives us, once again, the total, our state appropriation is 35.3 million. Then the next slide item, I just kind of want to see everyone, and everyone's heard this, and it's the ARPA dollars. It's our ARPA application at 19.295 million. It still has not been funded. And I actually reached out to the governor's office the first of this week to see what's the status of our application. Do they think it's going to be funded? What's going on with that? And what she did say is that the application, the governor's office told me that the application is still under review, and that they don't know when it's going to be approved. But it's kind of a wait and see. We're hoping that they're getting through them all. And so I'm hoping it's a positive and we hear that in the next month or so. But at this point, it's really on hold, but I reflected the funding anyway. And if you take another look down, and then the next line item is called telehealth. And it's really comprised of 3 funding components. Again, it's made up of state appropriations. They actually participate in a grant called the Northwest Region Telehealth Grant. And then the last one is what we call it stakeholder recovery. And that's where we actually bill the state, their stakeholders, a portion of their expenses to support the telehealth service that they're providing. The next line item is the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. That's a grant UETN receives. Then we go down to, and then I went ahead and I call it KUD direct support. It's PBS Utah now, but anyway, those are expenditure recoveries. This is what they pay us for providing some services for them. We have some miscellaneous grant income, and for the most part, this is all under the Laura Hunter's area. And then the next item I have is called other income. And that's where we use the word Universal Service Fund discounts, which is our E-rate. And I think you've all heard that. And that's really where UETN submits, it's based upon our circuit expenses. It's a 70% reimbursement from the program called, we call it E-rates. It's handled by the Universal Service Fund. But we anticipate this year at about 16 million. And you look at the difference between 2023 versus 2024, the biggest difference is going to be the San Juan project. I'm assuming that the San Juan project will be completed. And at that point, we will receive the additional funding from E-rate. But noted, we also have the expense to offset it. So it's not a net increase for UETN. There's a revenue and there's an expense that offsets that. And if we kind of continue to scroll down, there's a few other things. Just most of those right here, you're seeing Front Ridge Gigapop, internet access to IPS in the libraries. Those were all expenditure recoveries. I bill out for the service of internet connectivity. I received the funding back. Computer operations, that's an expenditure recovery. Again, it's something we do within, it's a house cleaning item. Again, it's just their share of a cost that of a service we provide. And the last one is actually what I'm calling UETN carry forward. And that's really all, what that is that's some of the that's our one-time equipment dollars that we have not spent that we're moving forward. It's also timing of grants. It's like the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. I literally carry that full grant forward. It's a timing difference. And probably the biggest thing is that we have a fund that it's, and I'm going to use the word, it's a bridge loan almost, but it's with our E-rate dollars. It now takes us probably about, I would say, 18 months from the point of application to the point of receiving the funds. So what that means is that I don't receive the funds for that fiscal year to the middle of the year. If I'm lucky, I'll have the funds back in December. And if that makes sense. So there's a timing difference of when it starts versus when we need the funds. And so what we are anticipating, including the ARPA dollars, I want to be really clear, including the ARPA dollars, we're anticipating, I think we have budgeted right now at $93 million for fiscal year 24. And then if we go to the next page, which would be the expenditures, and these are.
Hey, could I, Lisa, just ask a question on
you bet.
the income there? Just going back to the carry forward. So how much then would you estimate of that that's shown is actual true carry forward that's not somehow encumbered?
I would say it's up, and I'm going to use the word, what I would call carry forward, which is the emergency reserve due to timing, is about 7.7 million.
Okay, thank you.
And people, and I put that in perspective that I use the word, my applications for my E-rate applications are closer to about anywhere between 12 to 15 million. And that's that timeline I'm trying to cover for. Does anyone have any other questions on the income? And then the next page actually just, once again, it's kind of showing the same concept that you have the same columns. It's what we are approved. This is for the expenses. The fiscal year approved budget. The projected budget should reflect closer to actual, and that's the variance between the budget and the projected budget. The 24 is our new projected budget. And we've broken out between one-time and ongoing. And the one-time has two components. It's going to be our ARPA dollars of 19.2 million. And then we also have equipment dollars with one-time dollars. And I go back down to most of that's a carry forward at 5 million. What we do have is for each one of these individual budgets, we do have a detailed budget that supports it. And we could actually provide that if anyone has any questions, would like to see any of it. As you can imagine, when you just looking down the, I'm going to comment two things. The administration, that is where what I'm going to use the word now, the emergency reserve contingency is posted right now. And that's where that's at. And that's why it looks the way it looks. And then the other line item that's fairly large is called operations. And that's for that. There's the key component of that one is our annual circuit expense. And I'd have to go pull up the budget. I can't remember, but that's the key component. That makes up probably 22 or 23 million of it. Two things, the circuits and the thing called commodity internet that we buy. Anyway, that's what that budget is made up of. And when we scroll down, I would just say these are all the individual budgets. I can provide the detailed budget that supports it. And I think for us probably will be, I would think moving forward, if we do receive funding approval on the ARPA at that point in time, it would be, we will actually provide the breakdown of where the ARPA dollars will be applied and review that application. We do have an application of general categories and we'll address it then. I feel like at this point in time, I didn't include that, but I could. Do people have questions? And our goal is for you to review it this time. And I go back down to, if you're looking at it afterwards, because I know there's a lot of numbers. If you want to send me an email, I can, if you want detail on anything, just send me an email. I'll go ahead and send out the detail. But the goal would be to have it approved in June 2023.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate you taking the time to go over this. Once again, this is one of our most important responsibilities as a board. So it's good to be able to have this meeting beforehand to review and discuss. Any questions or comments from members of the board?
Oops. The instructional services, does that come primarily from funding from the Corporation of Public Broadcasting and also the applications that you support like Canvas?
I would say probably about 50% of it comes through the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. The component Canvas is paid with state dollars.
Right.
And we do have that broken down. We've actually broken it down saying this is what this Corporation of Public Broadcasting is paying. They pay for a lot of personnel, but they do pay for that in the instructional services.
I have a question related. Of course, we have the ARPA funds that we're waiting for, but there were other CARES COVID-related funds that were received by UETN that have helped pay for contracts and services. Of course, eventually those contracts, those 5 years, for example, I'm thinking of Canvas and a few other things. Eventually those contracts are going to run out. And Lisa, this could be a question for you. It could be Spencer too. I want to make sure we're looking ahead, appreciative of the COVID dollars that we received in order to be able to pay ahead for a number of these contracts. But those bills eventually will be due as we need to renew them. And just wanting to know what your thoughts are there and its impact on our budget.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead?
I'll just give a couple general thoughts and Lisa can maybe fill in some of the blanks. But as for CARES funding, I think it's two primary areas. It's on equipment, which were prepaid with, I think we still have a year or two. And so you'll see in a couple of years, maybe even next year, our overall income and expenses drop because of that. That CARES funding will drop off. We'll have to figure out if there's some urgency in finding state money or other revenue sources to offset some of those if it has impact to the network. The other side is you asked, Dr. Wagner, is the licensing. And there are some conversations with our stakeholders about UETN, working with them in compiling a software licensing legislative request, either for this year or for in perpetuity. That's a role that UETN has taken on because of this UETN funding and kind of a few years before that. And we'll talk, I think Rick Gaisford may touch on this from the Education Advisory Council, because that was a big part of the conversation as they met last week. And that will probably be something going forward we'll need to consider as a board in terms of seeking funds to offset what we've received either through CARES funding or one-time state funding for software licenses.
I'm going to add though with Canvas that one, and you're totally right. All the other softwares, with the exception of Canvas, we did request funding for additional software for Canvas at one point. And that was about 2 years ago. And we do have those funds coming that I plan to apply to public ed and higher ed. In particular, it's higher ed, the one I'm looking to cover. And what we need to do is we're going to get quotes we're going to be receiving quotes, and then we will look at that. My goal is hopefully the additional funding we received for that will be applied 100% toward the campus that we requested it for. So we are definitely got that on our mind though. So I feel like with Canvas, we'll have to see what the net cash. I don't know what the pricing is going to be. I think that's what it is, but we did receive some funding that ongoing that we will apply toward the higher ed portion of Canvas. And I know that we did receive pricing for the public ed portion, and it came in. We were, I think Laura's group did an amazing job. They came in. I was anticipating it to be higher, and they did a great job negotiating. So I'm hoping the same for higher ed too. But we're definitely
Thanks.
watching.
Other questions from the board?
Any concerns about E-rate, Lisa? Is that going to continue to be a steady source of income?
We're comfortable with E-rate. We're very comfortable. They are slow on approving our applications, but we're very comfortable with the funding source.
Excellent job, as always. We appreciate you, Lisa. You really watch the money carefully and have total confidence in you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, we would invite board members to review the materials. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to Lisa or Spencer directly, but we'll be looking at this as an important action item for our June meeting. So Lisa, once again, thank you very much for the explanation and discussion. We'll go on to our next I announced something that the UETN staff felt would be a good discussion for our board to have, a very timely one. I'm actually back east in DC for a couple days for a higher education conference, and I can't count the number of times that this particular topic is coming up. It is a timely topic and one that's really popular right now in higher ed, and I know public ed as well. So we're pleased here this morning to have Dr. Gavin Harper from Salt Lake Community College who has joined us. We appreciate him being here. We'll ask him to introduce himself, and he'll be taking some time to talk about AI in education from his perspective. We also have our very own board member, Greg Shearer, who will be discussing this topic, as well as Advisory Council Chair Rick Gaisford. And then we'll also have Justin Brooksby from the UETN team who will also be speaking about this. So it's a bit of a panel discussion. I think they would be open to an engagement from members of the board too. So if you have questions, please let them know. But I believe that Dr. Gavin Harper is going to start things off for us.
Well, thank you, Chair Wagner and members of the committee. It's exciting to be here. Generally, I am just a consumer of the UETN media and videos for our e-learning department here at SLCC, so it's nice to be able to talk to the group. So I am the director of SLCC Online and e-learning here at Salt Lake Community College. Laura asked me to talk a little bit about this as a continuation of one of our discussions that started in the UTTC committee earlier this month. So I think they put me first so that I could maybe give a boots on the ground description of what's happening with AI and how some of the institutions of higher education are responding to this. So I work under academic operations, and on my team are people from testing services and also the libraries here at the college. So we worked as a team to try and engage a response. The first thing we wanted to address is that students have a lot of questions with this. And so I'm also over faculty and student support. And we noticed even at the start of the semester that students began to flood our support emails with questions. Can I use AI? Is this something we have in place? Do we have any policies here at the institution? Simultaneously, faculty on a smaller scale, we're also asking the same questions. What do we do? We have faculty who are incredibly excited about this possibility, and we also have faculty who are incredibly nervous about what this is going to do to their classes. So we wanted to engage a kind of neutral response on all of those fronts. So as a team, we responded by creating a page on our library. I'm over online and curriculum development and instructional design. So it wasn't necessarily appropriate from our side, but we did want to engage with the library. That seemed to be the place that would deal with information literacy and also academic integrity. So we created a page on our library, and I'll share it here as well. I'm not sure if I need to share my screen. If those of you in the boardroom would like me to do so, I certainly can. But we created this page that talked a lot about information literacy, and it talked about how to create citations in a very neutral tone. If you're going to use AI, you should be citing it as a source. And so for the faculty who were incredibly excited about this, we wanted to provide resources on how to do that. We also created a sample syllabus statement for faculty. They can alter this, they can change it. It's not at the level of policy at our institution. So they can jump in and alter this to fit their classroom. What we did suggest in a lot of conversations that we had across the institution is that somehow you need to address this. Students know what this is. They are using it. It's part of their browsers. There are extensions within their browsers that make it very easy for students to get answers to test questions, or to have it write discussion posts, or to have that write full-fledged essays within their course. So not dealing with it and not answering those questions was causing anxiety both on the faculty members' part and on the students' part. So being very direct about what that was, and having a conversation in class or putting it on your syllabus. We also listed part of this are recorded conversations, which were Zoom meetings. At SLCC, we have about 10 campuses across Salt Lake County. So to get everybody together, we always had these on Zoom. We recorded them and we posted them on the institutional webpage on that link that I sent out earlier. And what our faculty were really interested in is, what are the resources that are most valuable for us to learn more about what this is doing and how we respond to that? So we created a list of resources, articles, academic research to put together. And then in e-learning from instructional design, we also put together a guide for faculty on how to create 3 tiers of academic integrity or exam security. So a very stringent and high level of security, which for us involves utilizing Class for Zoom with a remote proctoring option, engaging Respondus Monitor, which shuts down the students' access to other programs and extensions within their browser. We had a medium level of security that involved Lockdown Browser for secure interactions for quizzes. And then we also had a kind of lighter level of security as well. So that's how we responded. And I'm going to try and stick within my timeline. And I thought I would just kind of address that as one way higher education is interacting with us. So I think I'll turn it over to the smart people to do some talking. So I think it's Greg here next as well.
Thanks, Dr. Harper. So my role is on the technical advisory committee is to liaison between the committee, the council, and the board. And last couple of months, we've had some really lively discussions in our TAC committee meetings. And we've kind of, so one of the questions is, what's UEN's role in emerging AI tools and systems? And I really want to invite, since I don't work for UETN, I'd like to invite Jim Stewart to kind of chime in here to talk in behalf of UETN on their role, I guess. So Jim, go ahead.
I don't know if I'm saying anything official, but as far as the technical side of this, just a couple of thoughts. One is that we've been very interested in seeing what is actually going on with AI, and especially with the ChatGPT. I first became aware of this last fall with Troy Jessup showing me some things that he had used ChatGPT to develop a schedule for his on-call staff, and showed me all the parameters that he put in that and how it was able to just quickly generate that for him. We've been involved in several different conversations with the TCC COSIN group and with the TAC and others, and just want to make sure that from a technology standpoint, that we keep in mind that there are some very important aspects of AI and machine learning that will be very helpful to UETN in the future in being able to take all of this data that we're getting from our network about the performance of our network and what's going on, that's so much data that no human being could ever hope to make sense of all of this. And we're going to need these AI engines to be able to interpret and give us actionable data and information from all of this data that we're collecting. And so I think for us, and where it really has a lot of applicability, is in the performance of our network moving forward and our ability to ensure that we have good network performance. So we're keeping a close eye on the AI because of that. The other thing that just would remind the board about is that there's often conversations about how we need to regulate or monitor or maybe even block certain types of technologies. And UETN has really been successful in our backbone and our network by being neutral and taking that neutral stance. And we're going to continue to do that. And so if there are things that will happen with this technology, it will happen at the level of the institutions and their applications and how they use this. And we'll continue to move this data and make sure that we're not interfering or getting in the way at all. And I see Dr. Harper nodding, so you might want to comment on that. But we're not here trying to figure out how to regulate, but we are here trying to understand how to best use this technology within our mission and what we do. So, Greg, anything else you want to say?
I just want to jump in really quick, Jim, if that's okay. It looks like board member Jason Strait has a question.
I do. Greg, Jim, Gavin, I appreciate this discussion. And it goes into a larger discussion and debate that I've been having with my own son and daughter. My son is an engineer, and my daughter-in-law is a programmer for ASI automation here in Utah for AI driving vehicles. And we have had the debate about ChatGPT and the use of technology as a whole, with my son giving the argument and my daughter-in-law saying schools really aren't a test bed for how things are really happening in the real world, because teachers always say, in the real world, you can't go do this. Well, in the real world, my son, who's an engineer for Terex Corp, is on the shop floor working with a welder. And when they need settings for something, what does he do? He pulls up Google, he pulls up ChatGPT, and you cannot know the entire welding code book. You can't know and so I often wonder why we shoot ourselves in the foot by blocking these types of technologies for our students, when in fact we should be embracing them and teaching our students how to use them in the real world. So Gavin, I just maybe like a response to if I'm kind of outside of where we should think, or what you think we should be doing this way.
Yeah, no, and again, I at least from an institutional perspective, we are attempting to stay very neutral as well. That was a moment you saw me nodding with Jim there as well. We do have faculty who are already encouraging and including this as part of their assignments. I'm also a college professor and I'm an English professor, so this one hits me really hard. If you've ever seen how fast it can write an essay for you, first time I saw it, it made my heart drop just a little bit. After I reconfigured, I have ChatGPT in my midterm and my final essay assignments right now, immediately suggesting, how are you going to create this writing prompt and what did ChatGPT say? And then that's the first part of the assignment. The second part of the assignment is, what was it missing? You've learned so much in this class. How do you put together that second piece? What did ChatGPT not put together that you really need to include, and how would you craft that? And then the third part, are you going to have research? Let's look at the research that ChatGPT has. It doesn't do research very well. It doesn't do citations very well. And in fact, it often lies about them. So I ask it to do all of these things, and what I'm actually hoping my students do is begin to evaluate ChatGPT and the differences between AI versus their own work. So that's what we do in instructional design. The faculty that are really intent on utilizing this, we want to make sure it's available. We want to have really good scaffolding assignments to include this. And for most of those faculty, and especially for me, just like in English, this is an equivalent to having a calculator, the advent of the calculator in math classes. I think that caused a lot of nervous anxiety when that came forward. ChatGPT might do that to English professors right now. And we have two responses. You can either try and block it and pretend that students don't have access to it through another mode, or you can engage it and give them some real life skills about how to utilize this effectively. So that's what we're hoping to do here at the institution. And again, staying very neutral. Some faculty are incredibly nervous, and we show them some ways to make their exams as secure as possible. But I think our students really know this is out there, and they're going to be using it if we don't address it. So that's how I'd answer that, Jason.
Okay.
If I could jump in and just provide a little bit of an answer, and that is that in our conversations in the TAC that are not going to come to this group as a recommendation, but their recommendation to us across the board from all of the TAC members is that we should be embracing the ChatGPT, and that we should be embracing AI, and so they're really encouraging us. So we had a bit of a laugh because I was asking, so you're saying that UETN should be paying for us to have accounts on that, and you know, I was just being a little bit silly about it, but they all came back and said yes, absolutely. They really think we should be engaged and really using this technology and exploring it.
Other questions for us on the tech? If not, we'll hand it over to Rick.
As you can see, Justin and I are sitting here together. Well, we're probably coming from very similar backgrounds. My initial comments are, as I have, there's sort of this watershed market. I think it was, sometime in mid-November when ChatGPT was, the announcement came that it was coming out. Everybody started paying attention to it. It's one of those landmark events, I think, that we will remember for a long time going forward. Maybe akin to, for some of us, the first time that we saw the internet and when it came into being, or as it was mentioned, the first time you saw a calculator and what were the possibilities there. This is really, I think, one of those landmark events in the evolution of technology and that. And in my meetings that I have both with colleagues and educators around the state of Utah, but also across the country, there's hardly a meeting I go to now that AI or ChatGPT does not come up into the conversation at some point or another. And in fact, it was just a couple of weeks ago, I paid particular note when Jim Stewart was hosting his TAC meeting, and the conversation for a large portion of that meeting focused on just uses of AI in the work that people were doing or in their own interests. Actually, it was affirming to me that if these are, as you know, I consider to be really, really smart people, that they're also fascinated with this. And so this is something that I think is completely new. And I think and it provides us with an opportunity. And again, I think, in my conversations and with others in that, the question is, do we block or do we figure out what we need? What can we do differently? And in fact, I was even on a call yesterday with a representative from a small startup company, and he shared, he goes, if you're just going to be using it to write a paper, you're really missing out on what the possibilities are, and what kinds of things that AI really could do for you. And then he gave in his company, and some things that they're doing, but he gave just a couple of, using students using AI to take and look at election results and to analyze those election results, or using AI to to help them doing some really heavy duty research. If you were, let's say, wanting to, in this scenario that he shared, you wanted to do a review of Supreme Court decisions over the last 100 years or something like that to see trends in that. And that's research that you couldn't, it would be so difficult to do, but with the advent of AI, the possibilities are there, and the list goes on and on and on. And I think as I've had conversation with educators, we don't want to lose this opportunity. We just have to figure out now how we're going to make this fit into the work that we do and into the work of education. If we're worried about students that are writing, they might turn in a paper. Well, I can remember back when I was teaching in 5th grade, and we had the World Book Encyclopedia on CD-ROM, and the kids would use that. They thought they were turning in their paper, but they forgot to take off "Produced by World Book Encyclopedia" at the very bottom. It's not. To me, it's not. It's using the technology to help them in the process. That they might be using this to help them to do the research and to be able to find information and to do that. But the real learning is going to be not so much maybe the final product as it may be the process that they go through and how they document the work that they're doing, how they compare the results and the things that they're doing. That's going to be some of the power. The advisory council, I was supposed to report, we had this on the agenda, but unfortunately we had some really good topics that came up, and we didn't have as much time to talk about this, but this is something that the advisory council will be talking about in their June meeting. Particularly is having an in-depth discussion on AI in education, and I'll be able to report back even more about what people are thinking and what our role is and what UEN's role is going to be in doing this. And UEN's already doing some tremendous things, and Justin can probably share a little bit of that with with just the staff that he works with and how they are helping us to understand. And that, so Justin, unless you have questions for me, I'll turn the time to Justin.
All right. So a lot of the stuff I won't repeat Rick's, everyone's kind of said it, but we initially had some inquiries come out. I think it was specifically with regards to Chat GPT. These inquiries came out to our C forum group. I did get some messages from, for example, the University of Utah Education and Policy Center asking what UEN's stance was on it, whether it should be blocked. And things have evolved a lot since then. But I know initially with Chat GPT, for example, Alpine District was inclined to block it because it had a requirement of being 18 years of age or older. And then since then, Chat GPT changed it to age 13 and older. So it's evolved rather rapidly. So, our position, I think, will be pointing to the policies that universities and LEAs develop on that. But I think the consensus that we're seeing is what everyone said in this conversation is how to integrate this with best teaching practices, integrating it into learning. And also there's a component of digital citizenship. It most likely will become a big piece of that in what we teach. We are interested in putting together a website with basic information on AI, ways it's being used, links to different policies of our institutions that we work with. And then my group is interested in putting together a course to help teachers navigate the use of AI and how to use it with their students and in their classroom. So we've already been doing a lot of research on that. We had several presentations at the USEC conference that we saw. Even, we had some speakers come in from, different states to help us with that. And then even today at the C4 meeting, I think Apple's here today talking about AI. And then we also have ed camp style conversation that we're having on AI in this meeting as well. So those are kind of what we've seen and what we're expecting to do. And like everyone said, I think it's a great learning tool that we can take advantage of. we just need to help educators understand the best ways to do that. Any questions? That's all that I have on that.
Is there any dark side to AI?
You know, there's dark side to AI. We've seen it in the news already, and it's these dark discussions with people trying to break it. I mean, that's one of my concerns of just opening up an AI conversation with the students. That's maybe for mental health reasons, they're asking for some support from AI. That's a little bit concerning to me. Those types of conversations that students might have.
I was just reading a New York Times article on it. I guess you can get into deep conversations, and sometimes if you kind of violate the rules, that the AI will come back at you and suggest things that are pretty dark and not appropriate. And I guess that's something that has just been uncovered recently. And I think in relationship to all of this, there has to be some kind of an education program as to what AI can and cannot do, and its potential dangers as well. That be the stance we take, is that yeah, you can use it, but you better be aware of what it can and can't do, and potentially what its dark side is as well.
I think you bring up a good point. I think one of the things that, you know, as I looked at this in education, and you know, if we just turn it, you know, and that, you know, we don't have students learn a process of how to use different tools and resources, we can run into, I think, some of those problems that it may cause. You know, it's one of the reasons that, you know, from the state office, we work to get the program Scribble, because it helps students and adults and teachers as well, you know, to be able to document the process. How did they go through? Where did they get research, you know, their information from? And that's still very, very important. All of those skills are probably even now more important.
This article said at one point it declared out of nowhere that it loved me. It then tried to convince me that I was unhappy in my marriage and that I should leave my wife and be with it instead. Anyway, it's just, there is some interesting conversations. There are people that are happy that if you thought that this was a real kind of a person, that it might be quite disturbing to somebody who's maybe not mature enough to understand what it really does and can do.
Yeah, I read that article. It's very interesting. I know since then, those were the very, talking about early days, which was months ago. But I know that you know, they've already put protocols to block that, and people have tried to break it as much as they can. So I think those parameters might exist, but who knows what is coming, you know, down the line in the future. But yeah, those are concerning things, and I think that's part of a digital citizenship discussion. And the strange thing is, you can look up dark things on the internet, and you know, we can block those to a certain extent in the schools. They can always be found. But the one piece that's a little bit more disturbing is that the chat with the AI seems like you're talking to a real person, and it's going to seem even more like that in the future when they pair it up with audio and video responses. It will look like you're chatting with the real person. Dave's got his hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question or comment and question. To me, in the K-12 setting, I can't see us blocking this or staying away from it. It's going to enter the K-12 arena, but it's very much like when we introduced the internet into K-12 schools, and we were talking to those lab techs and things, no unsupervised internet use. Because if I understand this right, if it's out there on the web somewhere, these generative AIs will find it. And depending on the user and what they're looking for, that will govern what comes up on these searches, not just generally using the AI is bad kind of thing.
Right.
Matt, looks like you have a comment too, or a question.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to chime in because AI is being tested and used extensively in the healthcare field as well. Not so much in our rural hospitals, but I just wanted to give a few quick examples. AI is used pretty extensively already in image recognition for diagnosing tumors, different types of cancer, as well as X-ray, CAT scan, MRI. AI is used to read those images, and there's a lot of studies comparing its ability to detect a fracture on an X-ray compared to a radiologist's. The other big area it's being used is in documentation. Providers spend a lot of time documenting their visits with patients, and so they're testing tools that it basically is AI listening in the room and documenting the conversation with the patient, so the provider doesn't have to do that later on and take up more time. So we'll just continue to monitor how it's being used. Not a lot of uptake in our network sites at this point because they're smaller rural facilities, but I just wanted to chime in for the healthcare side.
Thank you, Matt. Oh, please, yes, Greg.
I'm sorry, just real quick, you know, if you want to get a real feel of where AI was, is, and is going, there's several podcasts that are available. I listened to a couple of them last night. It's fascinating. There's an avatar that they created, this person created, that documents kind of Jack Nicklaus's his life in golf, asking him about any kind of shot that he had, any kind of tournament that he was in, and he will talk right back to you. Anyway, it's fascinating. There's a lot of stuff going on with AI.
Thank you. I very much appreciate this discussion. I do want to be a little sensitive to time. I'm keeping an eye on the clock as we have other items. Any other questions from members of the board or comments from our guests? Well, this is an extremely important topic, one that I don't think UETN UETN will definitely be a part of going forward. So I think it was very, very helpful to have this discussion this morning. We'd like to thank Dr. Gavin Harper for joining us this morning. Thank you very much for taking the time as well as your expertise. Thank you, board member Greg, as well as Rick and Justin. We appreciate the discussion this morning. Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Okay, we're going to move on to our last discussion item. It's connection policy, and I believe Michael from the UETN team will be taking this one.
Thanks, Dr. Wagner, and thanks to the board for having me here today. We decided after a quick review of our existing connection policy that it feels a little outdated. The last time that it was revised and reviewed and approved by the board was in 2019. We have an expanded team now that works in procurement, and we've become a little more efficient. So we think that we can do things faster and a little more efficiently. So we would like to give you a heads up that we are taking a look at our existing connection policy. And I'll be engaging several groups to help me with this revision. So Jim's group, Laura's group, Lisa's group, and then our E-rate team to give us input as to how we can revise this so that it becomes a document that we can use going forward. So I would just like to, this is just more just a heads up that in our June meeting, I'll be bringing a red line document with the revisions and then a final draft for approval.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Okay, we appreciate the heads up and we'll be looking forward to that. It sounds like as an action item in June. Or Spencer, Laura, will that be an action item in June or will that be information still or?
The plan is action item.
Action item. Okay, great. Good. Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to our reports now. We'll start with our executive director report. Spencer.
Wagner, I'll also being cognizant of time, we have committee reports that I think have some good information. So I will keep this very brief if I can, and of course, if there's questions, we'll try to answer those. This is just a quick summary of our legislative outcomes from the last session, and Lisa touched on these. We did also receive some funding for compensation that's similar to what higher education received for our staff, in addition to what's listed on the screen. Also, just to note, the education software request the board adopted last September, that was funded. It was funded to USBE, but we'll be working with them on the contract and the licensing for that software. The one item that was not funded was the cybersecurity request. Steve Hess and I have had several conversations about what this entails, and it touches on kind of some policy measures the legislature weighed in on this session. Last year, they established a cyber security commission. This year, there was some legislation that establishes a Utah Cyber Center in connection with that commission. And it puts in some rather meaty language in its oversight with government entities, and that includes everything from water districts to mosquito abatement districts and education, which for us, for UETN and others that have been working in information security for several years, has raised some questions as to how exactly we will be involved with this. You will see either in the June or September meeting a proposal most likely around education and cybersecurity. As all of you know, this has been a conversation we've been having for several years, but something we feel like there's something that UETN does need to do to at least help draw the lines around where we are in the information security space in relation to what the state is being tasked to do through their Department of Technology Services and Public Safety. That will be something I think will be helpful for the board to get some discussion on. So we may have some initial, maybe conceptual ideas to float at the June meeting, and then something to finalize probably in the fall, because there's likely going to be a funding request associated with it. What we hope to do, and Steve Hess can obviously comment on this, that higher education has done a lot in recent years. There's a policy that they've adopted with the CIOs. They have kind of a shared vision for what security should be in higher education. Those of you in K-12 also know the challenges that exist, that we hope we can be in a supportive role. We have to be very careful about us stepping on the toes and liabilities that our stakeholders face. And so this is kind of a big conversation because it impacts really some of the strategic mission of UETN. We've been doing this kind of work for years with the work and expertise of Troy Jessup and his team under Jim. In fact, just recently, they completed a security assessment of the legislative branch and their technology infrastructure. And that's just indicative of the services that UETN has been providing over the years with pen testing and assessments and support when there have been breaches to our stakeholders. So from a legislative standpoint, that will probably be a theme and priority that the board will need to be a part of here in these coming months. So that's the legislative kind of quick jump through. It was a huge year for education. I know those of you both in the public and higher education area, there were a lot of big challenges, but hopefully some good things that also came from that. But I guess if I can pause there, if there's anything really urgent or pertinent or questions that we want to make sure we answer here? Okay. Dr. White, I'm going to take that as I think most people have started to recuperate from the session and we're ready to move on. So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that's probably a good assumption.
Okay. Just a few highlights from the last couple of months. Most of you know that the USET conference occurred last month. It was the largest conference to date. Our own UETN's Matt Winters is the current USET president, did a great job working on that. Did I lose the screen there? I don't know if you can see the screen still or not, but the next one was there was a big esports event that was put on by the Ken Garf Foundation at the Huntsman Center here at the University of Utah campus. I think they had, I want to say 6,000 students from across the state, esports teams. We had Doug Bowser he's the president of Nintendo of America, also a University of Utah alum. UETN provided technical support to that event. I think a lot of you know about the rapid expansion of esports in Utah. It's really actually quite fun to see if you haven't been to one of those events. Another thing just to highlight, Jim's team got a piece of a grant that the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity has in relation to broadband. This grant is going to try and identify in a very granular way where broadband availability gaps exist for education. We're going to be working with the state's GIS office, the Geographic Center, who maintains a rich database on broadband provider availability. And hopefully I'll be catching up with Patty this afternoon to talk about partnering with USBE with the database they maintain on student information. But hopefully what we hope will provide is a very useful tool by which to understand where those gaps in broadband availability are across the state. We've engaged a couple of consultants that will help us, and we look forward to sharing that with you here in the coming months. Michael's team has been extremely busy these last few months. This is their cycle. Just wanted to update you. They'll be updating and it'll turn into operations here with Jim, but 347 locations, I think, is the number. I might be off by a few. This is what is done every year in UETN, but I think it's important to highlight as we do this. This is what makes UETN work, is this aggregated procurement effort with E-Rate, where we leverage all of our partners across K-12 and higher education to get access to these funds in a very efficient way. But Michael's team works very hard at both doing the procurement with providers. There's 25 providers they're contracting with on behalf of these 300 plus locations across the state. It's something where at the end of the day, we save a grundle of overhead for our K-12 and higher education partners. And it's great work that Michael does. A couple other things on the engineering side of our networks, two big events. Our sister agency here, PBS Utah, their KUR radio has had some significant network issues in their streaming. In fact, it was throwing their station off air for a couple of days at one point. But this 6-month project is wrapping up. Jim's group has worked very hard with them to revise their network configuration so that they're in a much better position to keep their streaming up in a reliable way. Related to that, we had some issues with our streaming of content with a connection we have back in New York City. I think it's more just interesting to illustrate that our technical team worked with some providers to reestablish that connection with some new providers that runs through New Jersey and into New York. So kind of fascinating, wonky stuff, I guess. A few other things, just some events that our staff has been involved with. The Utah Women's and Higher Education Network. We had staff present at that. The Open Education Resource Symposium we hosted had a lot of good participation from our higher ed folks who've been working in this area. I know, Robert, you've done a lot of work in that area as well. And then Jim Stewart and Rich Finlayson at a large networking, meaning true networking, not just in the proverbial sense, but physical sense, conference. They were on the organizing committee, had 11,000 plus attendees. This is that high-end network kind of stuff, but they were part of that. Real quickly, just on a little more of a softer, sadder note, we last week lost one of our field engineers. He unexpectedly passed in his sleep, strode to care. He was well liked. Those that knew him, he had a pretty big personality. I unfortunately did not know him as well and only met him a couple of times, but I've since run into many people, both here at UETN and others that knew him. He was involved in the Kaysville area, as you'll note on the slide. Kaysville City Council, the July 4th parade chair. He was on the planning commission.
And so, Spencer, we did want to let you know we've not been able to see your slides. I thought that you knew,
Okay.
but when went offline, we've not been able to see the last couple slides.
Okay.
At least.
And
So.
you know, they're not critical. It's more for the visual. Just for time's sake, I don't want to. I know we're short on time. But a quick side note that I think was a nice gesture is many of you know we're part of the DTV or Digital TV Consortium with the other broadcasters in the state, and through that we all maintain what's on the west end of the Salt Lake Valley, Farnsworth Peak, which is the primary broadcasting antenna for the translators across the state. ABC4 Utah also lost an engineer last week unexpectedly, and another engineer who's going through some significant health challenges because of an accident. So last weekend they lit up Farnsworth Peak, which was kind of neat. They haven't done that for many years. And they did that in honor of Stroh and this other engineer at ABC4 Utah that passed. I just wanted to read what the director of that consortium sent out and was featured on a story on ABC4 Utah over the weekend. He said, each of these friends have given much of their lives to provide relevant content for their stations and networks to the residents of the state. Lighting of the site pays tribute to all of them. So we'll miss Stroh. These field folks, just so you know, it's a unique lifestyle, but they do put themselves in harm's way. It's physical work. They're in the outer reaches of the state, and they're part of what makes things get connected. So on that, I'll end and thank you.
Spencer, thank you very much, and certainly our condolences and best wishes to the families of those who have passed. Thank you for sharing that. Any questions for our executive director? Okay, thank you again, Spencer, and I'm sure we'll hear more about the legislative session too and out comes in subsequent meetings, but thank you for your efforts and work on the Hill, you and members of your team, and appreciate the outcomes that we did have. So thank you. We will move on now to our advisory council reports, and I realize that we've hired a consultant to help us better benefit from our advisory councils, and here I am giving them all three of them a very short amount of time in our board meeting to report. So I apologize to our advisory council chairs, but if you could keep your comments brief this morning, perhaps we can provide a little more time during our June meeting for longer reports. But we'll hear from Matt, and then Rick, and then Greg, please.
Great, thank you. I'll be brief. We met yesterday. It was a brief meeting, and just a few highlights. We covered a number of the legislative bills that passed in this session that related to healthcare. I won't go through them all, but we have a long list of them on our website, mostly related to licensing, behavioral health, substance use treatment, a lot of which is being done over telehealth. So that was a good discussion. We have nominations open right now for the 4th annual Deb LaMarche Telehealth Excellence Award. That's always a really fun thing to be able to do to recognize professionals in the state. Because of the need for behavioral health access in the state of Utah, this year the award is focused on behavioral health providers. doing telehealth. And we'll be announcing the winner of the award at the UETN Tech Summit on June 14th. So we're happy to be able to present that at that event, and that should be a great opportunity. The advisory council members this year will all be involved in reviewing the nominations and scoring them, helping us decide on the winner of the award. I provided a brief update. We just wrapped up our year-long project of our network refresh. So all of the healthcare sites connected to the UETN network have new contracts in place, new circuits. Every single site has a minimum now of 1 gig connection speed, which is something we've never had before. We have a total of 72 network sites and 20 satellite sites. So we're up to 92 total sites that we're working with that are part of the network. So I publicly wanted to thank all of the departments within UETN that helped with this network refresh. It was a huge project. It involved network operations, security, field services, project management, telehealth. Everybody was involved. Mike Shuping and his team on procurement, and it went really well. The sites are all very happy. So I wanted to thank everybody for their collaborative efforts this year to make that happen. Last thing, the NRTRC grant provided an update. There's just 2 things that I think the board would actually like to know about. One of our employees, Jolene Johnson, received a fellowship for digital inclusion, and she's created, and it's on the NRTRC website, but it's a guide to telehealth access for digital navigators. This is being utilized a lot in libraries. So back to that discussion we had about libraries, how to help patients connect with providers. It's a great course. It's a Canvas course that's already had a number of registrations. And we're also mapping what we call public access points, places throughout the state, in fact, our entire Northwest region, where patients can go to get public access to internet to do telehealth visits. And it's received a lot of recognition, actually nationally, because of the value that it brings to patients. So I just wanted you to know about those new resources and things that we're doing. And I think I'll wrap up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt? Okay, great. Rick.
Brief and Rick do not always go together, but we will work very hard to make that happen. We had our advisory council meeting just a couple of weeks ago, and we did have something that Spencer mentioned was the USEC conference. I wanted to just add, without UEN, that conference doesn't have it would lack. UEN provides so much to that, and it's a shining example, I think, of some of the outreach that UEN does on that. Not only do we have Matt Winters on the professional learning team, and that who's now he's the president of USET, and that who helped guide a fabulous conference that had 2,200 attendees, but also the almost rock star celebrities of trainers in that from UEN that delivers sessions every day, all day long, on all sorts of varied topics and that UEN helps with and that. And so it just not enough that you can say, if you're looking for, some part of the organization that really does draw attention to UEN and the value that UEN provides, it would be the USEC conference is a great example of that. We also just had a quick federal appropriations update, and I just wanted to make note that Laura Hunter was, it was mentioned in that Laura Hunter was appointed to her 2nd term on the American Public Television Stations, which is APTS Board of Trustees. I think it is fabulous when our when our state and UEN and that is being featured, it has a voice on the national level as well. So congratulations to Lara. We had a very interesting presentation from Jen Gibbs on press books and OER, open education resources, and textbooks and that and it would be worth to go back to the advisory council notes and to look over the slide deck on just on the different kinds of topics, and that these are textbooks or don't, you know, in the not only necessarily in the traditional sense, but, you know, in the sense that they're digitally accessed as well, that students are using and professors are providing, and that really lowers the cost for students as well, which is fabulous to be able to have those kinds of opportunities for our for our students around the state. And this was, and she also, you know, talked about a grant and that they've had that's helped with that. And this has really been focused on the higher ed, for higher ed and that, but it certainly intrigued me that I would like to see something in the similar vein of being able to do something like that even in K-12 and that. And then the last thing, just a couple of things for I think the board to consider going forward, as we did have, as Spencer mentioned, we did have a discussion on software licensing. When should UETN be involved? And I think those are conversations and that the council needs to have again, but I think also the board needs to be putting in there. I'm reminded of, in today's world, I'm reminded of some words of the superintendent a few years ago when we were doing the digital teaching and learning program. He said, this is something that we all have to do and we need to move forward together. And I think that's where UETN involvement in potential software licensing issues, and that is it helps everybody to move forward, and it's an equalizer. And as we talk about digital equity and some of those things, digital equity is also not only an access, but access to the network, but also access to the resources. And that's one of the things that I think UEN can help provide. And then also, obviously, it was also sort of mentioned in some of those software contracts that we've got multiple years, we do have a funding cliff coming up out there, and we need to take just be having planning for what we can do and how we might work with policymakers to be able to bridge that gap. That's about as brief as I could be. Sorry.
Thank you, Rick. No, I am sorry that we're cutting you short. Any questions for Rick? We appreciate that report. Okay, we will go to Greg.
Just really quick here. We've already had 20-30 minutes of a discussion of AI that we kind of discussed last 2 times in our meetings, the Technical Advisory Committee. And that was kind of an outgrowth of what we wanted to have happen. One of the questions that we do have is we talk a lot of technical issues and opportunities in this group, and part of it was at what point in time do we bring some of these issues and opportunities to the board. So anyway, that was kind of an outgrowth of what happened today. So let me just say, if you have any things that you would like us to talk about, to discuss, we'd be certainly happy to do that and bring a report back to you. So I'll yield back the time.
Great, thank you, Greg. And I would add, I am sure Rick and Matt would feel the same way too. So please pass along any questions or comments that you have directly to them. Appreciate our advisory councils. Thank you very much. I will draw attention to the board in the board docs agenda. There are recent media productions that you can review. Encourage you to do that. Our next meeting will be on June 9th. From 9 to 11 a.m., both in person as well as Zoom. And then please, board members, if you would put on your calendar September 22nd, that will be our all-day retreat for 2023. So it would be good to plan that far in advance and reserve that date. We would appreciate it. Any other items that need to come before the board? Well, thank you all for your participation. Thank you for those guests, as well as members of the UETN team who have joined. I wish you all a great rest of the day, and we will see you all in June. I will accept a motion to close the meeting. Thank you, David. Is there a second?
I'll second
Someone has to. Thank you, Jared. All in favor, please raise your hand and wave at the same time, and have a great rest of the day. Thanks all. See you.
Thank you.